Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. And today's episode is Grey's Anatomy, Season 5, Episode 5, Life During Wartime. The episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happens in the episode. So, as always, we start with our patients. So there's a car accident, which is briefly mentioned. And this is basically to give an excuse for an ER situation. There's two patients, both get triaged by Alex and Izzy respectively. But other than that, they're not really there. Then we have a lab being run by Owen, who is returned to the hospital, and he basically puts 4 pigs asleep under anesthesia, and then he stabs each of the pigs and he leaves Chris. Well, at first, everybody gets their own pig as part of the labs. However, when the labs are starting to be finished, Christina is left to try to triage all 4 pigs alongside her interns. George has to catch up on paperwork, so after the lab is done, he's off doing that. Meredith never takes part in the lab because she's helping Bailey with the 3rd patient, or the only human patient that got any screen time. Then we have Izzy and Alex were helping in the ER. Izzy refused to do the lab with the pigs initially because she cares about animals and doesn't believe in animal testing. And then the 3rd patient, or rather the only human patient that got screen time, as I mentioned, was a 10-year-old girl with an inoperable tumor that, because Richard is still having some ego issues over the hospital dropping in the rankings, he has basically offered to fly in this 10-year-old girl who has an inoperable tumor in order to operate on it. And obviously, if they succeed, that's big news for the hospital. And he pulls in Bailey, who he believes is the future of the hospital, who's going to be able to replace him one day and has the potential to become the best general surgeon. And so he essentially puts her in lead and tells her to figure out how they can get this tumor out. And then she pulls Meredith onto her team because, as we've seen in past episodes, she had a love for a Barbie doll. And Meredith brings in an Anatomy Jane doll. Now we're moving into the dramas. So Derek and Meredith start going through some of her mother's boxes that were in the house, which some contain a lot of Meredith's childhood things, such as this Anatomy Jane doll that she found, which, of course, when she brings into the hospital, because she has this nostalgic connection to it, puts Richard off because he's reminded of the fact that after he broke up with her mother, she had carried it around the hospital nearly constantly, which brings back bad memories for him. Then we had Bailey, who, of course, has the connection to the Jane dolls from the previous episode we know, and that is why she decides to let Meredith take part. And while they're thinking of ways to work on this inoperable tumor, which they ultimately end up taking out all of the organs, removing the tumor, and then putting the organs back in, Meredith can be credited as that having part of that idea because through playing with the Anatomy Jane doll during their meeting, she comes up with that idea from taking the organs out of the doll and putting them back in. So ultimately, it ends up being a benefit that she had the doll around. We've already mentioned that Owen has entered the hospital, and this episode really is his true introduction episode. He was introduced previously, briefly, but this is his first, like, he's actually now an employee of the hospital. He's going to be there going forward. He has an official job at the hospital now, and so he runs the pig lab. Then he has some conflicts because, of course, as somebody new, he needs to be introduced, and it starts with the fact that he, of course, was a combat emergency surgeon. So they didn't have all the resources and technologies that were present in the hospital, obviously out in the field during the army. So he's teaching trauma like he's teaching it to the army. Use what's in the room with you, fast and dirty, things like that. And you've got like Shepard and Sloane coming to him being like, you use this skin glue on this cut. We are right here. You could have just paged us. Then this guy wouldn't have such a bad scar. Or, some of the tissue had died a bit because he didn't get like a proper cleaning. And it's like, we have these resources. And Owen does seem open to listening, but also he is coming from that different background, so he's teaching it that way. Even with the pigs, he has Christina spend the entire day saving them and then tells her to put them down because obviously recovery from the surgeries would be long, hard, and they would suffer. But she doesn't want to do that because she spent the entire day bonding with the pigs. And there's also, in the previous episode, Owen helped treat Christina with the icicle in her chest. And this time, when he comes back, she's worried he's going to want a relationship and she's not sure she wants to be with an attending again. But then he pretends not to know her name. And at the end of the episode, she confronts him that, you know my name. And he confirms that he does know her name. However, he's not the same person that he was the last time they met. He reveals a trauma of the last tour he had with the army where he was in a medical unit of 20 and the other 19 ended up dying tragically, and he was the only one who managed to survive. And this is a weight that's on him, and he doesn't feel that he can be in any sort of relationship. So he pretended not to know her name because he's not in a place to be in a relationship, which is fair enough. Then we have like a Callie, Han, Sloane triangle, which is Erica and Callie. They've been sleeping together. They've reached awesome, and Erica's had her revelation that she wasn't straight all along, and it's like needing glasses. And before she had glasses, she thought she could see fine, but after getting glasses, she realized that green blobs were leaves. And this gives Callie a bit of like anxiety because she doesn't feel that way. So she goes and tests the waters with Sloane again, sleeping with him twice in the episode to basically, see if there's a difference, but then she finds that there isn't one because unlike Han, who probably is completely homosexual, Callie seems to be more on the bisexual side of things, which is also fine. That just means she's choosing her partner not based on genitalia, but on their personality and who they are as people, regardless of the genitalia. So she likes both, and that's okay too. But in order to figure that out, obviously she's cheating on Han, and by the end of the episode, she does confess to Erica that she is cheating on her. This after Erica was kind of chewed out by Bailey for being difficult about the surgery because she's not as experimental as Richard would want her to be, or like some of the other doctors in the hospital are. She's more of a tried and true method, and if it's not something that's straightforward and that she can guarantee a success rate of, she doesn't want to risk it. Then there was Alex and Izzy have apparently been sleeping together for a few weeks. He decides he wants to he wants to be exclusive with her. Isn't great at the romance thing, so he basically asks her if they're seeing other people because he needs to know if he's going to be able to meet one of the nurses that he had planned to hook up with, which was stupid of him. Izzy, of course, is offended by this, but at the end of the episode, he comes in and he's basically like, I don't do relationships. I've never done them. I don't know how. You'll have to teach me. She realizes that that was his way of bringing up the fact that he wants to be exclusive with her. So she then asks him to go steady, and they apparently now are exclusive. Of course, this is a drama show, so whether that remains the same or not going forward, we will have to wait and see because I don't remember. But at least right now they are considered to be exclusive. And I think that about covers all of the major dramas and patients for this episode. So now that we've been reminded about what happened, it is time to rank the episode first on our mostly objective ranking, followed by the personal ranking lists. And we start with our single episode supporting character introduction. Again, there was only one human patient that got any screen time, and that was Tori Begler, who was the 10-year-old with the tumor. And then we had the multi-episode supporting character introduction. And there's a new resident slash intern. So he introduces himself as Christina's new intern, but then online, when I go into like the Wikipedia page for Grey's Anatomy, or like the wiki fandom for Grey's Anatomy, I should say, he's listed as a resident, but he's only in season 5. He's in one random episode of season 6, but I'm counting him as multi-episode supporting because all of the episodes he's in is really season 5. Um, but either way, new intern, potentially resident, depending on where we go, but Dr. Ryan Spalding, now attached to Christina, does seem to be a little bit flirty, so maybe some drama there, especially since Owen's now said he's not at a place to be in a relationship currently. Then we have our supporting relationship development worth another 2 points, which is Alex and Izzy deciding to go steady. The impactful, memorable, moment line, etc. The pig lab is very memorable. Also a bit funny in that Christina's very sure she's not going to get attached to these pigs. The entire time she's trying to treat them at the beginning of the episode, they are specimens. They're not naming them. They're keeping detached. And by the end of the episode, she's completely attached. She's named every one of them. Even her interns don't get to use their names. They're numbered, but she didn't want to number the pigs because she was afraid the interns would be too dumb to realize she was talking about the pigs and would do a treatment on each other. Um, I believe she was talking about how, was it 2 or 4, would, if she said do something to like give pig 3 a needle that he'd put it in Lexi's ass or something like that. Either way, she names the pigs, she gets attached, and even when Owen tells her to kill the pigs after saving them for their own benefit because, otherwise they'd have to suffer through all of the recovery from the operations, she ends up not being able to do it at first and ends up just standing there staring at them, and then it's actually Lexi who helps her to come to terms with easing their suffering equals killing them, and she does so. But very memorable. Then we have the multi-season main character development, which of course is Owen now officially beginning his job at the hospital, and the fact that he is the one who came up with and ran the lab with the pigs to teach the interns about trauma and, quick responses to serious injuries. But that leaves us now with our negatives. So we start with our supporting relationship regression or breakup, worth 2 points. Callie continues sleeping with Sloane. This is cheating. She does confess to Han about cheating, but obviously that's going to, because it's right at the end of the episode, that's going to be an issue for the next episode. And Callie doesn't leave the hospital with Han. She leaves with Sloane as friends now that they've decided not to keep sleeping together because she's in an actual relationship with Han. But the fact that she was cheating at least twice in this episode is notable and minus 2 points. Then we, of course, have the early episode throughout most of the episode of Alex basically putting his foot in it, trying to want to be exclusive with Izzy, not knowing how to say it, bringing up sleeping with other people to try to open the conversation, and her, of course, getting angry about it, calling him like a barbarian, and of course she wouldn't want to be steady with a barbarian or exclusive with a barbarian or whatever, and she spends most of the episode kind of mad at him, until of course the end when she realizes that was his way of bringing up the conversation to be exclusive, because that's actually what he wants, is to not sleep with other people. But again, because most of the episode she was angry and they did have that fight, I took 2 points for that. And then we have our main relationship regression or breakup, which we know Christina and Owen are a main relationship up until Christina leaves the series in the future. And because in the first episode where he was introduced, they had the kiss, things were moving along. Now, he's not ready for a relationship, pretends not to know her name. That obviously is a regression from that initial start. Obviously, he is actually making a good decision because of the fact that he he knows he is not in a place, so he does not want to lead her on. Did he have to pretend to forget her name? No, but also, I think making things clear and clearly communicating his story of why he's not ready and that, he's not the same as he was before. So what they had before, at least at this time, is not possible. I think it's a good thing to be upfront about it, but it is still a regression of the relationship. So that was minus 3 points, which ultimately leaves this episode as a 5 out of 10. And that brings our mostly objective ranking to in first, Dream a Little Dream of Me. There's no I in team. Here Comes the Flood, Brave New World, and this episode is, unfortunately, at this point, in last place with Life During Wartime. My personal ranking for this episode, I actually really liked this episode. There, again, is a bit of a detox from the big dramas, which I do appreciate still. There's little dramas taking place, some of the side relationships are having some dramas, but also very small dramas, which are resolved within one episode. Oh, I forgot to mention it. Lexi and George. Lexi was mad at George. She decides by the end of the episode to forgive him and apologize for being mean to her because apparently, even though they're roommates, she hasn't been speaking to him at all. And by the end of the episode, she notes down well, she makes him box macaroni instead of frozen macaroni, which is actually better than the frozen macaroni, so is accepted as an apology by George. I did find that a little bit amusing as a moment. Obviously, I liked the pigs. I thought the pigs were funny. And also, just the entire concept was interesting. We even get some fun facts in the episode about how, you know, the benefits that animal testing have brought, like certain vaccines that they've created, but then also ways in which it's gone wrong. For example, apparently there was a medication that led to birth defects. There weren't birth defects in the guinea pigs, but then, like 10,000 or a certain number of thousand babies ended up with birth defects when they put it to market. But that also confuses me because obviously things were different then because I'm pretty sure nowadays, like you start with animal trials, then you have a very small group of human trials to see if there are side effects on humans once it's safe enough to move past the animal stage, or at least that's how I thought it worked. And then by the time it's getting to the general public, it would be thoroughly tested on both animals and humans for safety and side effects. That's what I thought the process was, and I may be wrong. Obviously, Grey's Anatomy thinks that that's not how it works, or that wasn't how it worked then, but I am surprised that that is a thing, and it was a fun fact to learn in this episode during Izzy and Owen's arguments. I also liked this as like a secondary introduction to Owen because he's coming into a new environment, a new way of doing his job. He's stepping on toes. There's some conflict and drama through him having a difficult time fitting in and having, methods that the hospital doesn't use or not utilizing the technologies and resources available because he didn't have those when he was in the army. But I also really like how Owen handles it in that, like, by the end of the episode, he has like a conversation with Sloane and Derek about, medically tell me how I can do better. Like, don't complain about how I'm doing things, but tell me if there is a medical reason why, like, that I am failing. Tell me that, and he's open to listening, which I think is a very, again, responsible and good thing to do. So I like Owen in this episode and as a character overall throughout the series. And I think this was a good introduction to him because it shows his how he's clashing, but also that he's willing to, take in feedback and change the way he's doing things to fit better into the hospital, which is something that honestly Han hasn't done. So Han, I haven't been a huge fan of since she started. Um, I do think she's gotten better. She's loosened up more. The relationship with Callie really helped to humanize her as a character, but she's still, at Grey's, like in Grey's Anatomy, at the hospital they work at. I think at this point it's still Seattle Grace. I know the name changes throughout, but right now Seattle Grace. They're very experimental. They're willing to kind of push the boundaries, and they have since season one with all the things that were happening there. And she's very, again, I mentioned this in the summary, by the book, do things straightforward, things that already have proven success rates that she feels confident in doing. She's not the type to go out on a limb to try something new, to take on a patient that others have declined because she understands the reason for those declines. And so she's had a hard time fitting in. She's still having that. Now Callie's cheated on her. So I know she doesn't last too much longer in the show. I don't know exactly how many more episodes, if it's the rest of this season, if she leaves during the season. I'm not certain. But I also am starting to feel like her time is coming to an end, especially with the fact that she had two conflicts in this episode. She had the revelation that Callie didn't quite share. Now Callie's cheated on her with Sloane. Then she had the conflict with Bailey after the surgery about how Bailey accused her of being so difficult throughout the surgery, even though it ultimately was successful. That didn't have anything to do with her, at least according to Bailey. So there is a feeling that Han is about to be exiting. But the point I was making is in comparison, you can see how Owen comes in, he has some conflicts just like Han did, except unlike Han, he's willing to listen to potentially make changes to push the boundaries to maybe fit in more in the hospital going forward now that he has this job and has decided to work there. Whereas Han's kind of the opposite, where she came in, she continued to be herself. She doesn't really fit into the culture of the hospital, who is more forward thinking, experimental, push the boundaries, do the difficult surgeries, try to be the ones that succeeds where others have failed. She's more in the let's stay in the box, stay safe, etc. Which is why you can tell how Owen continues into the series long term, whereas she is about, like I said, I feel like she's on her way out. So the comparison between the two, I think they're foils of each other. The other thing is Callie's starting to make me a little bit angry. This isn't necessarily specific to this one episode, but when she was with George, when their relationship first started, he wasn't sure about the relationship. She was all in. And, she had some problems with George not being all in. And then George cheated on her, which ultimately led to their marriage ending because she understood how harmful cheating was. She was hurt by it. She couldn't remain in that relationship or try to fix it after the cheating because, cheating is wrong. And now she's basically doing everything that George did to her to Han, which I think is kind of a really crappy thing. She's questioning the relationship. Han's expressed full interest. She's all in. She's crying because she's so in to this relationship. And, Callie's testing the waters, not fully there. She ultimately ends up cheating with someone who could be considered her friend, like Izzy and George were friends. And now she's told Han about it. And like I said, I feel like the series is getting ready to let Han go in the next, either by the end of the season or within the few episodes. Definitely by next season. I don't think she's in season 6. Um, so I think that's also something to be considering as well, is how she's basically doing to another what was done to her that she already knows is harmful. And I think that's terrible. I think you should try to be the bigger person, not, you know, I know there's that saying, hurt people, but also I think the world functions better when, you try to overcome your trauma and don't pass it along to other innocent people, because now Han will have to had to go through the experience of being cheated on, which she could have avoided had Kelly not cheated, and she's the one who has to deal with a partner who's not fully in while she's fully in, and I just think it's unfortunate. But overall, all of that to say, I do really like this episode. I thought it was nice. It wasn't everybody having huge major dramas all at once. It was a few minor dramas, really focusing in on Owen as a character, introducing him. The pigs were great. I gave it a 9 out of 10. And it's a 9 and not a 10 because infidelity is one of my triggery things. I really don't like infidelity. I don't think there's ever a good reason for it. I personally don't think it should ever be forgiven by anybody because multiple reasons. So I did take the 1 point on the personal side. But that does bring our personal ranking to there's no I in team. Life During Wartime is second place now. Then Brave New World, Here Comes the Flood, and Dream a Little Dream of Me in fifth place. And so our series ranking so far, mostly objective ranking is in order. Season 1 is the best, then 2, 3, and 4, and Season 5 has 40 out of 230 so far. Personal ranking side has Season 3 in first, followed by Season 2, Season 4, and then Season 1 so far last. And Season 5 has a score of 43 out of 230. Which brings us now to the end of the video, where we've now rewatched and ranked Grey's Anatomy Season 5, Episode 5, Life During Wartime. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.